Tuesday edition of Talking Sports with Evan, and it is a special episode as I have a special guest on the show, Fox Sports reporter Lily Zhao. Thank you so much for coming on to talk some Packers with me today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. I'm a big fan of your work. I know we've crossed paths a couple times with some high school broadcasts and whatnot, but it's great getting you on to talk some Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it's nice to kind of do this in this setting. So, again, looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Packer season kicks off Friday, going to Brazil, and be a quite interesting experience on what it's sounding like with the travel and with whatnot going on down there with their political issues. So, what are your thoughts with the Packers going down to Brazil on Friday? Start off with right there.
Sure, I think it's a good opportunity for them. Again, they're expanding. The NFL is expanding to international games, and the Packers have already played overseas once. This is their second time to do so. Only NFL game going on Friday night, so all eyeballs will be on them. I know the travel logistics and all that they've been working out for quite some time just to get this team, there safely and on time and ready to play some football. So. I know it's going to be a different venue down there, different crowd, but I know there's a lot of green and gold fans in Brazil. We've seen kind of their support for this team through the years, so it's going to be fun for them to get a chance to see this team in person. And just for them just to showcase their skills on a Friday night against the Eagles. Again, there's really no easing period for this team, so they're going full force. And while there are some unique challenges to how they're starting off the 2024 season, I think Matt LaFleur has his guys focused. They're kind of sticking with the company line of we're not going to really worry about anything else going on around us. We're there to win a football game, and while the venue might be in South America, our goal is to beat the Eagles, and we're going to play where we're told to play. So I like the fact that this team is focused and ready to go.
Yeah, I know that the Brazilian fans are excited. I've had a couple people from Brazil on my show in the past, and they're fired up to get to actually watch the Packers live, because unfortunately they don't get a chance to really see the Packers live ever except on TV. And in order to come to a game, it'd be very logistically hard. And here they're coming to them, and I know they're super excited for that. And a little bit different than the last time they went overseas, and I know that didn't go well. When you look at it from the travel logistics and all that, do you think there's some lessons that were learned from the trip to England?
I think so, just in terms of, how you get equipment there, the conditioning, how you kind of want to stay engaged in a different time zone per se. But I will say it does help out because the time zone is a little closer in Brazil than it was in London. So, they're able to kind of adjust a little bit better in terms of that. But I think this team certainly has learned a lot in how to get there and the preparation and keeping guys focused because, when you're in a different country, I'm sure players want to see this, that, and the other, but, they're being told to remain just very focused. You're there for a job and it's to win a football game. So I think they learned a lot from their previous trip. And like you mentioned, it didn't go well last time they played overseas. So hopefully they flip the script and they get a win on Friday night.
Yeah, because I know last time that's when Rodgers had the thumb issue and that lingered the rest of the season. And they made the mistake of going over and not having a bye the following week, where this time it's on Friday night, so you kind of get a little mini bye after the game. But looking at the team overall, 53-man roster has been set. Some injuries on the report today, nothing really standing out for the most part. What are your thoughts on the 2024 team?
I think they're going to be explosive. This is a team that is carrying over a lot of the same offensive weapons. The running back room does look different, but outside of them, your receivers, your tight ends, they're familiar faces from a group that really did a lot of damage towards the second half of the 2023 campaign. So you have a lot of playmakers returning. Obviously, Jordan Love got paid in the offseason, so I think a lot of eyes will be on him to see if he can prove why he's worth that $50 million a year. And I think he's confident in himself that he will be ready to go. So you have a lot of carryover from the offense. Really intrigued to see what this running back room looks like behind Josh Jacobs with, Aaron Jones gone and AJ Dillon on IR. And then you look at the defense. I think that's going to be the really intriguing X factor. with the playmakers they brought in with Xavier McKinney, you have Jair Alexander back there as well, and he's looked really good during camp. But what does this defense look like under Jeff Hafley, their new defensive coordinator? I think that'll be a really fun thing to watch that defense really blossom. And again, it was a very vanilla scheme in the preseason. We all know that it's going to be like that. So it's going to be kind of a first showcase for this Packers defense on Friday night. So I really like this team in 2024. They're stacked, but they also know it's going to be a really tough division to win. Last year, we kind of set the scene for the Lions and the Packers, but now the Bears are coming. We'll see how the Vikings do, but I really do like this 53-man roster. And the most important thing, though, they're healthy, and that's good to see.
And I'm going to premise this with right now, you cannot say kicker. We're going to get to the kicker situation momentarily. Any concerns outside of kicker for this 2024 team right now going into the season? Anything that stands out to you?
I wouldn't say any sort of concern because, again, we can talk all we want about, certain storylines in the offseason, but until we see them kind of step on the field and play an actual game, I think this team is pretty shored up. And then the kicker position, I think, is going to be a huge one to look out for. You have a guy who's coming in, Braden Arvison, who's very confident. And I love the fact that he said pressure is a privilege. And this is a kid who gets it. It's a kid who's ready for the spotlight and to be the guy, right? So I think there really isn't a glaring hole on this Packers team so far until maybe we see them play a couple games and then maybe something shifts. But I like the makeup of this team. I think that X factor right now will be, can the special teams unit perform behind Arvison?
Well, and it's unfortunate A.J. Dillon had to go on the IR for the season. His love of Wisconsin and his ties to Wisconsin now with his wife, were the new kicker, Arvison, his wife apparently from Wisconsin, is a big Packer fan. So I guess that's a positive thing for him right now. He's got ties to Wisconsin. And but moving on to, you mentioned the running back room. It's Jacobs and then a lot of inexperience. Do you see between Wilson and Lloyd, which one of them do you see kind of taking on that role as that number 2 back?
I mean, I think with how this Packers staff wants to structure it, I think they do want Marshawn Lloyd as that number 2, right? They drafted him for a reason, and to his credit, he told reporters and everybody he thinks he's the best tailback coming out of that draft class. So we want to see it come to fruition this season. I think he's going to be able to carry that load as the number 2 back, but we want to see him get healthy. So we'll see again when he makes his debut, but I think it will be eventually Lloyd and then Wilson. I loved what Emmanuel Wilson did during the preseason because, he really carried this team in terms of Josh Jacobs not playing, but also just the injuries to that room as well. So I think he's going to be ready for an extended workload as well. But I am really excited to see what this tailback room looks like. I think Josh Jacobs is capable of carrying a heavy workload, and I think he's going to have to do that just with the inexperience and the injuries behind him so far.
When you look at the defensive side of the ball, new defensive coordinator in Hafley seems to say all the right things. I know you mentioned they were very vanilla in the preseason, but what's just your initial vibe on Hafley so far in the press conferences that you've either been at live or you've been a part of in whatever capacity when he's talked to the media?
Sure. I think he's certainly a guy who knows how to connect with players. And, I think this is going to be a big hire for Matt LaFleur because, his previous defensive coordinators have not worked out. So I think this is kind of a big kind of make it or break it hire with Hafley because you want to see him pan out. But from all indications, just from how he's talked, his enthusiasm for the position, how he's able to coach guys one-on-one during camp that we've seen, I think he's a great fit for this organization and for these players, right? And you talk about having an aggressive scheme. He has the personnel to execute said scheme. And from everybody in the locker room who's talked about Hafley, they're so excited to play under him. They love the attack mode. And I loved what Hafley said during one of his press conferences where he says, I'm just going to let it rip. So he's ready for it. And I think we just kind of want to see what the scheme actually will look like. But I think he's going to be a great fit, and hopefully we see a dominant defense this season from the Packers.
So switching more to an even front, more of a 4 down lineman, 2 or 3 linebackers, depending on situation. They just paid Kenny Clark a lot of money, brought in Xavier McKinney, Preston, and Rashawn Gary go more at the hand in the dirt. Is there anyone in particular you feel that might benefit the most from this new scheme?
Sure. Yeah, I've kind of said this in the past, but I feel like, you hear the traditional names of Kenny Clark and Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary, and rightfully so. I think those guys will really thrive, but I'm looking for elite from Lucas Van Ness. I think that he's really a guy who can benefit from a scheme like this and from a coach like this. So I'm looking for him to really rack up those sacks this season and QB hits and just making quarterbacks feel the pressure from him. So I think Lucas Van Ness will be a guy really to look forward to in terms of that front per se. But also I think Xavier McKinney, I mean, you bring him in for a reason. He was a stud in New York. So what can he do in the back end of this defense? I think those are two guys to really pay attention to this season, outside of the normal names up front for Green Bay.
Jair Alexander seems to be in a lot more. I don't want to say he was in a bad place last year, but overall, he just seemed to be in a better place this season.
I agree. I agree, right? I mean, he's showing up to off-season responsibilities, and part of that is because he has a new defensive coordinator. He knows that, but I like the fact that he is showing up and being present, practicing hard, but also being a leader. And that's what this young team needs, right? It's a really young backfield outside of a couple of guys, and they're looking towards Jair Alexander. And so he's setting an example this offseason, and it's one that we expect to see from him. So the fact that he's coming in renewed and everyone's kind of singing his praises, it's going to be fun to watch because I think when he's locked in, that's when he's at his best, and that's when he plays his best.
Switching the offensive side of the ball, I know Matt LaFleur is not a fan of the question on the whole number one receiver thing, but if there's a wide receiver in this room that you feel is going to kind of take that step to, I guess, kind of become that that number one option for Love, who do you see it being out of the group that they have? Because they're very deep at that position.
Oh, it's tough for me to say. I mean, I'm in the same group of, those top four guys, and he could really be the number one. But I think we really saw, last year when Christian Watson was injured, we saw Romeo Doubs really take onus of his opportunities. And I know he's had a really strong offseason and camp and preseason. So I think Romeo Doubs would be somebody to look forward to. I know he's kind of dealing with that hand injury right now, but if you're looking for a guy maybe who could ascend to that outside of Christian Watson, because he would be kind of the name that you would think of being a pseudo number one, Romeo would certainly fit the bill. But I don't think that this is a team that cares if they have one, right? Because they have a plethora of riches. So it's a good problem not to have a number one receiver because you have literally six receivers that can do the job.
Yeah, I know. And the last time the Packers won the Super Bowl, it was great. You had Jennings, you had Driver, Jordy Nelson had a big breakout game in the Super Bowl. That's kind of his coming out party. You had James Jones. So I don't really feel you need truly a number one, but I think one receiver, as most of Packer Nation is excited of, is just seeing Wicks, and if he gets the opportunities, what Wicks can do, because his route running to me is, I'm not saying he's Devontae Adams, is very Devontae Adams like.
He is, and I think he's a guy that I think a lot of national pundits are now, opening their eyes more to a guy like Tay Wicks, and he's earned it. I think you mentioned the route running. No one's going to be Devontae Adams, but they can kind of be a player like him, right? Tay was certainly somebody special. So I think Dontavian Wicks certainly has the tools to be a very, very elite receiver. And the fact that he was able to do that in his first year last year was impressive. But I really like the chemistry he and Jordan Love have, for sure.
Yeah, as you said, they definitely have got the chemistry. Offensive line can be kind of a sneaky concern. You had Tom, who dealt with an injury a little bit of this offseason, and then that right guard position is kind of unsettled. I know LaFleur said he has a plan for right guard, but he's not willing to really discuss it. What are your thoughts on the O-line?
I think the O-line, you have four positions that are kind of set, and then that right guard, like you mentioned, is the one kind of in flux. Again, between Sean Ryan and Jordan Morgan, it's who do you plug in there? I'm not sure the route they're going to go, but do you go with the more experienced guy in Ryan, who's, has played a bunch of snaps for this offensive line? Or do you go, hey, I drafted Jordan Morgan first for a reason, and he's super talented, so let's plug him in there to start. I couldn't tell you which way or another they're going to go at right guard, but I think either of those guys would fill in admirably for that spot, which is good. But again, the versatility of everybody on that line is really impressive. But I think again, just whoever Matt LaFleur trots out there when they start off against the Eagles, that'll be kind of a big indication of, all right, we're going to trust the rookie, or we're going to go with, somebody who's played a bunch of snaps for us at that position.
Special teams. Seems like special teams has been the Achilles heel for the Packers since I can't even remember. I think since the last time they won the Super Bowl in some shape or form. And now you got the new kicker again. What are your thoughts on moving on from Carlson when they did? And is Bisaccia starting to run out of time in that room in order to put a good unit on the field?
I'll address that first one first. I think it's a different time because I know Brian Gutekunst said, I'm not as patient with my specialists as I probably should be or could be. And, you've referenced Ted Thompson and his willingness to stick with Mason Crosby. And we all know how that career turned out for Crosby, right? I think this year for the Packers, they were in a unique situation because I think they believe this team is a Super Bowl caliber team. So do you want to risk, having kind of an inconsistent kicker who didn't really flash or really show as much improvement as they would have liked this preseason in Anders Carlson? Or do you bite the bullet and say, let's just start over and get somebody that, maybe can be more consistent at the quote unquote little things like extra points, who has a big leg, who we've been interested in since he came out of college. So I think that was kind of their reasoning of saying, there's a lot at stake this season. Let's not, maybe have somebody who's as inconsistent. But that being said, I really do think that Anders will get, he'll catch on with a different team. He'll have a good career. I think it was the Packers just needed somebody who was going to be ready now this season because of the end goal that they see this team finishing with. Then maybe keeping him another season where he could have, an up and down year, but he's getting better as he goes, kind of thing. But in terms of Rich Bisaccia, I think this is also a big year for him, right? We've seen, him use starters, and the drafting is different in terms of the guys that they keep on the roster for special teams purposes. So I think this will be a big year for him. I mean, your kicker has to come through, your return game has to be good, and we'll see if they can do that this year.
You mentioned the division much tougher. The Bears on paper seem to be improved. The Lions are a solid team. I think the Vikings are kind of in a bit of a slight mini rebuild as they move on from Kirk Cousins. Do you see the Packers finishing first, second, or do you think the Bears could possibly sneak in there and surprise both the Packers and the Lions?
You know what? I think in time that the Bears could surprise, but I think, first year rookie quarterback, they're kind of getting into a groove. I mean, it's really difficult, I think, as a rookie quarterback to take your team on a Super Bowl run. Not to say it can't happen, but I think this is a team next year in Chicago that really could surprise a lot of people after Caleb Williams gets a full year as a starter under his belt as the Bears starting quarterback. So I think Chicago still will be a very tough out. I mean, they're playing Caleb week 11, right? I mean, I think the time you want to play the Bears with a new rookie quarterback is earlier in the season. So the Packers see them week 11. And by that time, this could be a well-oiled machine in Chicago. So outside of that, I do think it's going to be a 1-2 finish between Green Bay and Detroit. I think just from all indications from talking to guys that work in the Detroit market, I mean, this is still a really good team. They return a lot of good starters. And they're focused on knowing that they had a shot at the Super Bowl and they let that go. So I think the lines are going to be tough out for the Packers this season. But that being said, I think it's going to be 2 competitive games this year when they do their home and away. So I think it'll be a 1-2 Lions Packers finish, and potentially we could see 3 NFC North teams in the playoffs. And that'd be fun.
It'd definitely be a lot of fun. And looking at the NFC in general, 49ers, Super Bowl representative last year, the Eagles the year before that. What outside of Green Bay, and I know they have Super Bowl aspirations, I guess who's going to be their biggest challenge this season of being able to be in New Orleans at the end of the year?
Oh, that's a good question. I think every year it's going to be different, it's kind of a cliche answer, but I really do think that the Lions will be a big challenge this year. I think that there's a lot of hype around Detroit, rightfully so. I do think the Niners always have had the Packers number, so we'll see if they can beat them this year. But I do feel like Detroit will be a big contender in the NFC this year. There are other teams in the conference that are certainly going to be threatening, but I think Detroit, it'll be a fun intra-division battle, I think, for NFC supremacy. And hopefully we do see a different team come out of the NFC this year than San Francisco. Because I think that window is closing in terms of the talent gap between the Niners and other teams in the NFC.
Yeah, and they have spending a lot of money too in San Francisco. Eventually, that's got to come up eventually when you got to now start possibly restructuring or releasing people. AFC Chiefs are looking to be the first team in the Super Bowl era to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. Is there a big challenge for them in the AFC? You know, you have Baltimore, you have hopefully a healthy Aaron Rodgers in New York, Cincinnati if Burrow's healthy. Who do you see coming out of the AFC?
That's also hard to say, but I think I really like the teams in the AFC that could compete with the Chiefs. I think the Ravens are going to have a great year. I think the Dolphins are going to be really fun to watch, and I think Aaron Rodgers and that Jets team is kind of an unknown because we didn't get to see Aaron Rodgers play football last year. So what can he do with this Jets team? Can he get them to the playoffs finally? And so I think if he can stay healthy and this Jets team can certainly perform, I think the Chiefs are going to have a lot of contenders coming their way. I think the Bills. I mean, they're trying to get to that next step, right? So the Bills, the Ravens, the Dolphins, the Jets, and of course the Bengals with Burrow. I think those guys are all going to hopefully contend, and I'm hoping we see a different AFC team as well.
It would be nice to see a different AFC team. I would like to see Packers Ravens. I've always had a spot for the Ravens in the AFC. I think that would be my preferred Super Bowl, and I think that would be super exciting to see. If the Packers can't be there, it pains me to say this, but I think Detroit and Baltimore, Detroit and New York could be a lot of fun. Any particular matchups?
Yeah, I agree. Not so much right now, but I think those are the ones that you mentioned are going to be really fun to watch. If those are the 2 teams that make it.
Lily Zhao, Fox6 sports reporter, joining Talking Sports with Evan here today. Going to switch gears to Major League Baseball. Milwaukee Brewers are in a pennant race, currently the largest lead in the division. I think they're 10 up on the Cubs right now. What has really impressed you this season about the Brewers? Because they're supposed to kind of be a mini rebuild for them. A lot of young guys being pressed in the roles that maybe they're not quite ready for. And kind of the opposite has happened as they are not only competing for a division title, but the 1 or 2 seed in the National League.
I think a lot surprised me, right? I think that can be said across the majors is that the Brewers, I don't think anyone outside of the organization thought they were going to be as good as they are. They've had 17 different starting pitchers. You know, their bullpen arms are coming in and out, but they're still performing at a high level. You know, you lose Corbin Burns, you don't have Brandon Woodruff, you lose Christian Yelich, you don't have Devin Williams for months on end in the first half of the regular season. And this is a team that you mentioned still is 10 games up on the Chicago Cubs, and they're currently a half game back of the Phillies for that really crucial number 2 seed in the National League. So how they're able to do this is that they just are kind of having these reclamation projects, right, in terms of their pitching. They have guys that they're kind of bringing in. They get a fresh start in Milwaukee. You fix their pitching or get better at a certain pitch. And these guys are really helping this Brewers team go deep into innings, and then you have a really good bullpen. On the other side of things, this is a really smart young team under Pat Murphy. And, he's telling them to be good at running the bases, be good on defense, be good at hitting. So they're doing a lot of the little things right, which is why I think they currently find themselves in the position that they're in. And they're always a tough out because this is never a team outside of maybe a couple of games this year that they were blown out, but every single game they've been in. And that's what is certainly impressive because when you have such a young team, they're doing a lot of the little things right, which is why they're in the position they are.
Speaking of Pat Murphy, he's got to be the National League Manager of the Year, right? Something that Craig Counsell was never able to get. I think he kind of got robbed from the Manager of the Year a couple times, but Murphy's got to be your Manager of the Year.
I would hope so, and we'll see if everybody around the nation agrees. But with what he's been able to do with this team, and they're not winning. They're not just winning, I should say. They're winning convincingly. And the fact that they're in the same conversation as the Dodgers and the Phillies, who have a payroll that's almost double Milwaukee, and what Pat Murphy's been able to do has been a revelation with this team. And you have to also give props to Matt Arnold, right? The Brewers GM. I mean, with what he's been able to do, the pieces he's brought in, identifying Jackson Chourio as a guy that can be a superstar on this Brewers team. These are all key moves that the front office and Pat Murphy have been able to really make with this team. So I really hope he does win Manager of the Year. Again, we'll see if that does come to fruition, but he certainly deserves it for what he's been able to do this year.
And then Jackson Chourio, he's looked like it might have been a little too big for him first month-ish of the year, but since then he's in Rookie of the Year conversation, and he can be a 20-20-20 player between now and the end of the season if he hits 2 more home runs. His growth's been extremely impressive.
It really has, and I think he's just stayed patient at the plate. We know what he can do in the outfield. We know what he can do on the base paths, but he stayed patient at the plate, and he's just been so productive. But what I really like about him, he's 20 years old, but he's confident. And I think that confidence really carries over into how he swings the bat. He's calling his own grand slams. I mean, he's doing stuff like that where you're thinking, how are you just 20 years old? I mean, you're playing like a veteran in the majors, but I think his confidence and just his ability to get on base has been super good for a rookie. So, I mean, Jackson Chourio, phenomenal player, and it's been just fun to watch his journey this season, not kind of giving up during those months where he had a bit of a slump to now where he's just on fire, just getting hits like every game, it seems like.
And seems like past few years, the Brewers could just fall short of getting through that wild card round. Is this the year they make a playoff run? They get past that wild card round, or well, if they get a bye, they're obviously past it. But is this the year that they can make some noise in the NL?
I hope so. I mean, that's why I think getting that number 2 seed is going to be crucial, right? Because you get that last bye until the division series. So I think for them, they want to keep their foot on the gas pedal because there is a stretch coming up for them where they play the Diamondbacks, the Phillies, and the Diamondbacks. I think it's like maybe a 10-game stretch, 9 or 10-game stretch there where this could go sideways if they lose a bunch of those games because as we know, the Diamondbacks are very much in that wild card conversation right now. But I think for the Brewers, if they can get that number 2 seed, that, avoids having to play one of those danger teams. But I think it's going to be tricky. I mean, I know they swept the Braves last time out, but you can never count out Atlanta in the postseason. The Mets are in that conversation, the D-backs, the Padres. I mean, these are teams that are really tough. And we saw how the Diamondbacks caught fire, right, in the playoffs last year. And they got all the way to where they did. So, I think getting that number 2 seed is crucial, but hopefully this is a year where even if they are a wild card team, where they get over the hump. I think it'd be so fun to watch this young team get over the hump.
Yeah, and I know it seems like it's like every time the Brewers get eliminated from the playoffs, whoever eliminates them ends up making the
World Series. Yeah.
It's nice to actually be the team that gets there this time. But before we wrap up, Badger football had their first game this past Friday. Sorry, the whole holiday throwing me off. So Friday, what are your thoughts on the Badger season? I know we're 1 game in and it was kind of a rough game. What are your thoughts and expectations on the Badgers this year in football?
I'm hoping, and I don't know if this was the case, I'm hoping they are not unleashing their whole playbook because Bama comes to town in week 3. Because if this is them unleashing their whole playbook, it might be a long year. I think, again, we've talked about this whole air raid offense. We're going to see lots of points, lots of, yards thrown, but it hasn't come to fruition. And, again, in his first start for the Badgers, Tyler Van Dyke didn't have the cleanest game and, able to use his legs, but fumbled a snap or fumbled a ball as well. So he didn't have the cleanest game. And it's hard to kind of pinpoint where this Badgers team goes because South Dakota, they should win on Saturday. That should be I shouldn't say easy, that should be a win for Wisconsin. But after that, I mean, you played Bama, USC. Where does this team stack up with those teams? Um, if they have not held something back, and this is where their offense is going to be, it might be a long year for Wisconsin. But we've seen what Luke Fickell was able to do in his second season with Cincinnati. He turned that team around. So I'm hoping that's the case again this year for Wisconsin. And I think that week 3 showdown against Bama will be kind of a big indication of where we can expect the Badgers to be this year.
Well, Lily, I appreciate you coming on and joining the show here. It's been fun talking to you. I wish, we could, I talk to you all night if I had the opportunity to, but I know we both have other responsibilities we have to get to. I do appreciate if people want to follow your stories and follow your coverage and that. How can they find you?
Sure. I mean, they can do it right there on the lovely Twitter tag you made me. So you guys can follow me there at Lily S. Zhao. Or if you want to find our stuff on fox6now.com, you can find our work there as well. But yeah, just hit me up on Twitter. That's probably the best way.
Well, again, thank you so much. I will be live again tomorrow, shows back to back. It's high school football kind of throws a wrench in me because aside from broadcasting for 101.7 The Truth out of Milwaukee, I also do some games local to Racine as well through the Racine Raiders. So Thursday games kind of throw a wrench in my usual days, but I will be doing another show tomorrow. I'll be giving my thoughts on who's winning the divisions and representing the NFC and AFC in the Super Bowl. But Lily, thanks again for joining the show. Thank you for those watching. The podcast version will be published first thing tomorrow morning. You can find it anywhere you get your podcast. Right now, you can watch the show on X at Evan with Sports and on Facebook and YouTube, Talking Sports with Evan. I will talk to you all later. Have a great rest of your evening, and hopefully we can talk about a Packer victory next week.